Welcome to Real Talk with Tina and Ann. I am Ann, and today's guest has lived a life full of powerful pivots and purpose. Zoe Smith's story is one of reinvention, from classroom to government halls to deep healing, and now into a life that helps others heal too. Born in Yorkshire, UK, where she currently lives, Zoe has traveled across the world and through some truly transformative chapters. She started out as a religious teacher, then moved into adult social care, rising quickly to help shape national policies, including the UK's Caring for Our Future white paper, aimed at reforming the entire care system. She later took on a major role with NHS England, which is National Health Services, for those of us who don't know, focused on mental health policy. But after years of high pressure work, Zoe did something rare. She pressed pause. She walked away from the system to reconnect with herself, and that's where everything changed. Through walking, yoga, meditation, and counseling, Zoe began her own healing journey. And it didn't stop there. She became a mental capacity advocate, helped rescue a failing home care service, and then fully stepped into the world of wellness. She spent 2 years living and teaching in China, traveled across Southeast Asia, and fell in love with traditional healing practices along the way. Now, as the founder of Your Vitality Coaching, Zoe brings together everything she's learned, offering a blend of yoga, Reiki, sound therapy, QHHT, personal training, hypnotherapy, and life coaching to help people heal and thrive mind, body, and soul. Zoe, welcome to the podcast. We are so thrilled to have you here to dive into your incredible story.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is a first for us. We've never had someone from the UK. Our systems and policies are very different here, but there is one thing in common across the globe, and that is mind, body, and soul transformation. You know, there were many things that shaped you to become the master teacher and coach that you are today, but you've worked in government, studied religion, and now run Your Vitality Coaching. From your time working in adult social care, what did you learn about the challenges in the system, and how has that shaped the way you see healing and well-being today?
I think when I was working in workforce development for adult social care, that was my role in local government and when I moved into a national role. And I think at that time, I had a really good overview of what good practice looked like in that sector. And I think I was quite up to date on all of the best practices, both in England and some of the other countries around the world. We were able to, for example, look at Christchurch in New Zealand after the earthquake. Christchurch did an extensive remodel of their health and social care system, and they were able to really integrate it. So it was amazing to see things like that. And then when I dropped down to a grassroots level, I very quickly realized that everything that I'd seen at a national level that was considered good practice, although there were pockets of that, it was actually quite dependent upon postcode as to where that good practice was available. It wasn't available right across the national offering. So I think I had a very aspirational and optimistic view of what could be achieved from the sector to support people's health and well-being. And then as I started to work on the front line, I realized that actually in a lot of cases that wasn't happening. It was hugely dependent on funding and different areas of the country. And then over time, as funding has dwindled and the economic situation has changed, that decline has just got worse. So more than ever now, people are turning towards alternative options. In the past, I think people weren't aware of alternatives so much. And I think now, because they're so desperate to improve their health and so frustrated at waiting times and availability, they are much more open to trying different approaches. And so that's been interesting. And I suppose for myself, I was able to use different approaches at different points in my life, and they've always worked for me. And so I've been able to share that and bring that understanding to the people that I'm working with in your vitality coaching.
I think it's amazing. Your knowledge is so vast, and you have really taken everything along the way and just taken it with you on this journey. I think that that is so beautiful. One of the things that happened to you, though, is that you spent a time like a lot of us do, where you were just working in the corporate world. You were working up to 70 hours a week. I mean, what was going on with you back then?
I am quite an ambitious and determined person.
I would say.
And sometimes when channeled in the right direction, that can be amazing. And other times, I think, especially when I was younger, I couldn't find the off switch. I didn't
Oh,
think about myself. I didn't think about my own
mm,
personal needs and self-care. And I was just so focused on achieving what I wanted to out of my career, making sure that the projects that I was managing were achieving their goals. And of course, whenever you're managing a project in the corporate world, there's always deadlines to meet, and
sure,
they're always tight deadlines. You don't have
sure.
the luxury of hanging around. So I think I got really caught up in that. And there have been cycles where that's repeated itself in my life. So when I was working back in corporate, that was the case. I was working a lot of hours a week. And then, of course, you learn from it, you move on, you think, right, I'm not going to do that again. And then suddenly you find yourself doing it again. So when I came back into teaching much more recently, only in the last few years, when I came back into teaching in the UK, when I came back to the UK,
Okay.
there I found myself again working 70 hours a week,
Oh, wow. Okay.
teaching. However, when you've done it once and you know it doesn't work, you're much more able to step up and go, hang on a minute, self-care, where have my boundaries gone? This isn't working. And I was able to step out of that again. It teaches you lessons for sure. But only if you listen to them.
Yeah, I mean, you have to listen to your body and your soul and your mind and everything that encompasses us and figure out what works for us. And when you were at the height of your career, you made a bold choice and taking a 5 month pause. And that's a lesson for all of us, I think, to know that it's okay to take care
Mm.
of ourselves. What did you learn about yourself during that time of pause?
It was a really interesting time in my life actually, and it shaped very much who I am today. It reshaped the direction that life went. I ended up I used to work from home a few days a week when I was in that job, and I remember one day finding myself sitting underneath my desk crying, and suddenly thought to
Oh,
myself, hang on a minute, you're sitting under your desk and you're crying. There's something not right, Zoe. And I
oh,
crawled out from under the desk and Googled symptoms of depression. And as I looked down the list, I could tick pretty much all of them.
oh
Um,
my.
so that was sort of what kick-started it, because I wasn't listening to my body fully and I wasn't listening to what was going on. And so my body went, right, you're going to stop. And the universe made me stop. So I did. So it was an
Okay.
enforced stop. And then I was able to take a step back. I had counseling. I was adamant that I didn't want to go on to antidepressants. I wanted to find other ways. So even back then, I really wanted that self understanding and the ability to work through things. And it was
Right.
through doing that, through the counseling, I was able to understand what was going on with me. And at the time, I thought it was a job that I was in that just I wasn't happy in my job, wasn't happy in the team. I blamed that, but actually through the counselling, as I dug a lot deeper, I uncovered all sorts, things going back to childhood, all sorts of different things. And when I unpicked it all, I realised that actually not only was I not happy in my job at the time, I wasn't happy in my marriage, and various other aspects of life. So the counselling helped me work through all of that and understand myself on different levels that I'd never considered before. it it's allowed me to free myself of a lot of the ideas that I had about myself,
Mm.
and to actually sift through and think about who I am. But it also, alongside that, I was able to get back to nature and get out walking every
Mm.
day because I wasn't having, I'd taken time out of work, so I was able to get out, go walking. I discovered meditation. I had discovered yoga quite a few years before, but I didn't have a regular yoga practice. It was just something I knew about and sort of dipped in and out of every now and then. But whilst I was off with depression, I was really able to explore yoga, and I discovered Ashtanga yoga at the time and I got really into it. And I really found that the combination of the yoga, the meditation, getting out in nature and walking really helped me through the period of depression and anxiety I was facing. So I was able to come through that. And through that whole process, that was when I decided actually, I don't want to be working at a national level anymore. I
Mm.
think I felt like I'd learned and done as much as I wanted to at that level. And I wanted to move much more into a grassroots, local kind of level where I was actually working with people and making a difference. And so that's what I did. I went back to work. I retrained as an independent mental capacity advocate, which in England is someone who works with people who have been assessed as lacking mental capacity.
Mhm.
And we help them to make decisions about healthcare and where they're living and those kind of things. And for people who are in care who don't have family or whose family can't visit, then we're able to go in and check on them, make sure all their needs are being met and that they're being cared for well. And I really enjoyed that role. It was really nice to be able to give back and do something
Sure,
for
sure.
people.
Yeah, I would think that that was a real blessing because I've always found when you are in roles like that, you actually get back more.
You do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it makes you because you're
Mm.
giving, it makes you focus on the energy exchange. So if you're if you're giving too much of yourself, you can't do it for long. So you burn yourself out, you can't pour from that empty cup. So it really makes you constantly aware of what you're doing and making sure that you're looking after yourself as well. Um, it really reinforced boundaries for me.
That's really important because I've worked in fields where I was a director of a battered women's shelter and things like that. And it's always really important to check back with yourself. And we used to have like meetings at the end of our shifts and just asking each other, how are you and things like that, because that was really important to be able to leave the job where we needed to leave it and
Yeah.
be okay internally before we ended up leaving to go home to our families or whatever, because some of those things don't leave you. And if you just continue to have that build up and you not process it and work through it, it can really become a problem.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Having that support in place for each other as workers, it's really important.
Yeah. Now, you have a love for religious studies. So I was really curious to find out how that happened and the journey that you took there.
I think I've always been really curious about people and what what shapes how we think, what shapes what we believe, those kind of things. And it just so happened at school that RE, religious education, was one of my favorite lessons, and I was interested in it. And so as I was sort of working through school, and you get to choose what you'd like to do for your GCSEs, and then you get to choose what you like to do for your A levels. That was always a subject that I really enjoyed, being nosy about cultures, traditions, and then understanding what shaped them. So I decided that I wanted to study that at university,
Mm.
and I wanted to teach it because it's as I had a passion for it, but a lot of young people don't have an interest in it. They see it as boring.
Oh.
They see it maybe as being forced to
Hmm.
become religious, and it's not about that. It's not about following a religious route. It's about looking at religions from a sort of sociological perspective or a philosophical perspective. So I studied it for my degree, and I was really fortunate to, whilst I was studying, to be able to go to India
Hmm.
in my second year, and to be able to travel and study out there, and that gave me a real thirst for more. I just loved my time in India. It was amazing, and to be able to experience the Indian culture, and there is India opened my eyes to so many things, because there isn't just one particular religion that's grown there over time. There's a lot of different religions and traditions, and how that has shaped Indian life and society was just fascinating to me. It was like nothing I'd experienced at the time before. So yeah, that led me to teach religious studies for a few years. But that interest, I think the interest in people and cultures, and the opportunity to travel has influenced where I took that later in life. But it's also meant that I have a real keen interest in people, and I still have that interest. I'm a bit nosy.
Yeah.
I like to know about the people that I meet and build relationships. And then
Sure.
in what I'm doing now, that really helps me look at how I can help them, if I can help them, or um, how we can work together. So it's been really interesting to do that.
What was it like to actually live in Asia for you? I mean, that would have been such a different culture, and to be able to just pick up and go there and live in a different culture. What was that like?
I think I know for a fact my family thought I was absolutely crazy to even consider living in a different country.
Mm.
And it was something I'd really wanted to do. After I'd graduated, I had applied to go out to China and teach English with the British Council. And I'd got a place to do it, but unfortunately they were unable to organise my placement
Oh,
in time. So I ended up not doing that. And I don't know, maybe there was a seed in the back of my mind that never went away. And so it just so happened in 2019, I was able to go and fulfill a dream. And yes, it was a massive difference. And at first, it was a big culture shock.
oh, I
Um,
bet.
and it was my problem solving skills um, was so sharp by the end of it. It taught me such a lot about life. And not
Well,
only did I learn a lot about China and the Chinese traditions, I learned a lot about Asia. I was able to travel in different countries whilst I was out there, but also meeting with other expats from all around the world.
mm,
I have friends, I have a few friends from South Africa, America, Canada, Russia, all over the world.
that's
And
amazing.
I would have never had that if I hadn't done it. So not only did I learn about China, I got to learn about all sorts of other people's traditions and languages, and it was amazing.
Oh, that's just so beautiful. And how did their culture influence your understanding of healing and human experience?
When I went out to China, just before I'd gone, I'd had two car crashes in the UK. Neither were my fault.
Oh, oh my goodness.
One in 2017, someone had run into the back of my car in 2017. And I've always been very into my fitness. So at the time, I'd been training hard in the gym, and I just thought that the pain that I was getting in my neck and shoulders after that was down to training really hard. Because by coincidence, I'd been doing back and shoulders in the gym that morning. And then the pain hadn't gone away. And about 6 months later, I was finally diagnosed with whiplash. But by
Oh,
that
okay.
point, I'd carried on training in the gym through it. I was in agony. It was awful. So I ended up with physiotherapy. And before that had healed, somebody else ran into the back of my car. And so that then made the whiplash worse, really, before it had even had a chance to get better. So on the NHS, we have long waiting lists in England. So I'd needed an MRI scan, and I'd been on the waiting
Mm.
list for that. Eventually got an MRI scan a few months before I went to China, and that had come back okay. They'd identified it was whiplash, and there was some damage to my neck, but nobody had really mentioned exactly what that was. So I'd had more physio right up to going to China, and it sort of evened out. It was doing all right. And I got to China, and the mattresses in China are quite firm compared to what I was used to from the UK. So I'd been out there a few weeks and I lost feeling in my right thumb and my right
Oh,
hand. So I ended up having to use the Chinese health system. And I remember going in to see the doctor, and the doctor said to me, you had to, as a foreigner, I had to take my passport. So I'd gone in, sat down, given him my passport, and he looked at it and he sat up and he was like, I'm so sorry. And I was like, oh. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh no, have I come to the wrong place? Can't he treat me because I'm British? And he went, you from England? And I was like, yes. And he said, I'm so sorry. And I was thinking, oh no, what? And he said,
right.
and he said, you have the amazing NHS. Our health system is not so good. And I said, oh, it's fine. And in my head, I was thinking, our NHS isn't so good anymore either. So whatever, just let's see where we go. Anyway, let's say that I went in at 8:30 in the morning. About 2.5, 3 hours later, I walked out of that hospital, having had x-rays, a diagnosis. I'd seen an orthopedic consultant. I'd had a physiotherapy
Wow.
session, and I had the next 8 physiotherapy sessions booked in all in 3 hours. Now, in England, that doesn't happen. I'd had to wait months for an MRI. The waiting time to see a GP is 2 or 3 weeks sometimes.
Mm,
Quite often, you don't even get to see a doctor, you see the nurse practitioner. So I was blown away by their healthcare system. And then
mm.
after that, as I lived in China longer and got to grips with how things work, and I made Chinese friends, and some of them said to me, oh, you need to, have you considered going to see the bone setter? Well, the very term bone setter terrified me. It's just,
Yeah,
it
that's
didn't sound
different.
like somebody who was going to help me. But off I went to see the bone setter, and he was amazing. And basically, it's sort of the traditional Chinese version of a chiropractor. So he
Okay.
was able to really bring relief to my back. And then I discovered acupuncture and
Hmm.
different herbal treatments, and I started to understand how the Chinese um, view energy and the meridians within the body. And I started to see similarities because at the same time I was practicing yoga out there, and I practiced 2 types of yoga. I did hot yoga with a Chinese studio, and I did hatha yoga with an Indian instructor. So it was really interesting because I was getting the understanding from traditional Chinese medicine about meridians and energy flow, and I knew that that linked with Tai Chi. And then I was getting the knowledge of Hatha Yoga and how that works with nadis, which is the Indian energy channels that's referred to in yoga and Ayurveda. And I could see the similarities between the two, and it started to come to life for me. I started to
Wow.
see energy rather than just the physical body. So that it was fascinating.
This is very fascinating to me just to even listen to it. I mean, it would just be amazing to because in our society we don't have all those things integrated into our everyday. So I mean,
No.
it's really interesting to see how they do.
Yes. Yeah. And how easy it is for them to understand it, and how they automatically revert to practices using the energy and the channels, and
That is,
pressing different parts of your body. In Ayurvedic tradition, they've got marma points, and you see when people are meditating, often you'll see them using different hand positions, and so touching thumb to index finger or thumb to ring finger, or they're pressing marma points, and each one of those does different things within the energy channels. And just it just fascinated me. You used to see grandparents coming to pick the children up from school in China, and they'd be sitting there whilst they were waiting, sort of moving energy in their bodies. And um, it was just a whole different world to me, because as you say, in the West, we're not taught that as children. If as an adult you have an interest in it, you can find out about it, but it isn't taught to children. I really believe it should be. children connect much more naturally with energy up to the age of 7. If we were to teach children some of the practices of using their breath, working with energy from a really young age, I think we'd solve a lot of the mental health issues that we have over in the West. It'd be
You know,
interesting
I
to try.
yeah, I really believe that as well because, there's so many unhealthy things that our kids take in every day. And you become who you are as an adult. As a child, I mean, those things are those basic things that we take in. And if it becomes something that you just did every day as a kid, of course you would do that. And I think that that also has something to do with, of course, what you just said, the mental health, but also the physical health as well.
Mm.
I mean, a lot of them in China, in Asia, they live a lot longer
They
than
do.
we do. And I think that that has a lot to do with it.
And they live a lot longer with a lot less long-term conditions. The diet and the exercise out there, it has historically been so much better. We eat a lot of processed foods in the West.
Absolutely.
Of course, they're available over in Asia, and more so now than ever. So whether that's something that will change, time will tell. But sort of historically, they have eaten a lot healthier diet than we have in the
Oh,
West. And their approach to exercise, like in China, there's massive parks everywhere, even though you might be in the middle of a huge city, you don't have to walk far to get to another park. And as you
mm,
walk on an evening or in an afternoon, there'll be massive dance classes going on, Tai Chi classes, all different types of martial arts. And you'll see all the grandmas there dancing and young people doing sport. And it's just like, we don't have that in England. There's always complaints in the town I live in that there's nothing for the children to do, and yet in China there they had it.
right. And our kids have gone to being inside, playing video games, watching TV, doing a lot of unhealthy things, eating the processed foods that you said. Really, it becomes because everybody's doing it. And
Mm,
that's just kind of
yeah,
like a cliche kind of thing, but everybody's doing it. And so it's kind of hard to take your kids
yeah,
from everything else that's going on around them and try to teach them a lot of these healthy things. But when you're in a country where everybody's doing that kind of healthy living, then it would be passed on from generation to generation. And I
it
love
is.
that they are doing it from generation to generation and they get to do it all together.
Exactly. And you'd see maybe grandma and granddad at a dance class, and then you'd see mum and dad with the children, and the children would be there riding bikes and on their
That's
scooters, flying kites, whatever they were doing. And I know, like in my job in the UK, I work in a gym alongside what I do with Your Vitality coaching. And a lot of the clients that I see will be middle-aged through to elderly who have been sedentary for years, and a
how
lot of the issues they're experiencing health-wise now are a direct result of that. And a lot of them say, "Oh, I don't think the gym's for me. I don't think I want to come to the gym." And then they get there and they realize what the environment is and how it works. And they say they wish they'd done it years ago. Whereas in China, it's just a natural part. The grandchildren see the grandparents dancing or doing Tai Chi. Mum and dad might go off for a swim or a run. And it's just normal. Everybody's active and they live in big cities, but it's still normal. That work-life balance is much better out there as well, I think.
Yeah, our balance is really off here. The work environment, people are just expected to work way more many hours than they are to take care of themselves or their family or to reconnect with their family. So the whole system, the whole system needs changed. When they talk about going to a 4-day work week here, I think, that would really be amazing. And especially for kids with school too, for them to have less busy and more focus on self and taking care of self. I think that that's really important. I think it's a beautiful thing that you have, again, taken everything that you've learned and now you're trying to help other people. During one of your chapters in your life, you helped fix a failing home care service and turned it around in under 5 months, by the way. I
Mm.
mean, you don't do anything halfway. So what was that experience like for you, and how did it help you realize your purpose and your mission?
Managing the home care service for me was a hugely immersive experience. I'd come out of working nationally. I had my overview of what I thought good practice was, and I went to manage this home care service that had been inspected by the Care Quality Commission, the CQC, and it had been identified as failing. There were huge concerns, and so we'd been sort of given targets to reach, and clear plan in place of what needed improving. We worked very closely with the local authority safeguarding service and the police. So my first thing was to get the staff trained up how I believed they should be trained. So within the management team, we began with the management team, made sure that everybody was on the same page with their training. And then I delivered the training to the staff, and I made sure that every member of staff went through the training program so that at the end of it, everybody knew what was expected and nobody could say, I didn't know that. And at the same time, I put myself out on care. I went out with the team. They saw me delivering care to the standard that I'd trained them to deliver. So they knew that
Okay.
I knew what I was doing and I wasn't just telling them to do it. I checked their note sheets to make sure they were recording notes. And if anybody wasn't, I was bringing them back into the office to go through what was going wrong and why, and gave them that support. They all had regular supervision meetings, the type of meetings
Okay.
that you mentioned earlier, where you sit down with your team and talk about any tough cases or how you're feeling. They had very regular chance to do that. So I ensured that they were all on the same page. There was a lot of paperwork to put in place, but we got there. And CQC came back into inspectors after about 4.5, 5 months. And we went from having serious concerns up to being inspected as good, considered good. And the local authority were satisfied that we were a good service and started to refer more clients to us. And the police stepped down. Yeah, it was amazing. And it was amazing to see the staff grow in confidence. They lacked confidence. They hadn't had the proper training. So they were sort
Wow.
of doing what they thought was right. And in some cases, were making poor decisions. So they felt empowered that they were doing the right
Mm.
things.
See,
They were bringing problems to us instead of us looking for them. I met with all the service users and I made sure that they all had a good quality care plan in place that looked at what their needs were and what their wishes were, because sometimes those two things are different. And I involved the family in those discussions as well, so that we
mm,
were making sure everybody's wishes were covered. Um, and I remember meeting with service users the first time. I'd go to each individual service user's house and people would say, we're not very happy because this didn't happen and that didn't happen and we don't like this and we don't like that. And then the second or third visits, a few months apart, I was getting, oh yeah, we really like such a body. We like her all the time and we
wow.
like this and we like, and they would ring us up in the office and give good feedback. Instead of ringing up to complain, we were getting good feedback and it just felt so nice. It was tough. It was very intense. It taught me a lot about leadership and I learned a lot about myself,
Sure.
but it was very worth it. I really enjoyed it.
While I was listening to you talk, the word that kept going through my head was leadership. And I was like, that's what a leader does. You listen to their wants and their needs, and you really pay attention and let them know that they're heard. And that's really important. I mean, if they don't feel heard or validated, you're not going to get much back.
Yeah.
And the
No.
fact that then they were coming to you and they were telling you what their problems were because they knew that they would be heard. I mean, I think that that's huge. So I'm sure right then and there, you're like, hey, I'm a good leader. Where you probably already knew this before this job, that you were a great leader and that you knew what your purpose was. And that was now the next stepping stone to where you were going.
I think I'd always doubted myself as a leader. When I was working nationally, it was sort of based around project management, if you like. My roles were
Oh,
very project based, and so I knew that I was good at project management and organization.
mm,
But I didn't see in that the leadership side of it that I was doing as well. Um, and it was there, and I was doing it in just the same way that I did when I managed the care service. But it was that managing that care service that really brought home to me what leadership was. And some
mm,
of the staff that worked for me whilst I was running that service are still in touch with me now, years later, and I consider them friends now. And they still come to me every now and then, some of them with questions and like, and that's really nice. I feel really privileged for that. But then thinking about I've recently been thinking quite a bit about leadership, and I started to think about when I moved over to the deputy head role, the primary years program coordinator role that I had in China. And again, I look at how I turned that team around, because again, when I got there, they'd been without a coordinator for some time.
mm,
Staff morale was low. They
mm.
felt like they weren't supported. And again, it was putting that support in place. But whilst I was doing that job, I was also teaching a class full time. So they could see that what I was asking them to do, I was doing. So they couldn't say to me, I don't have time for this and I don't have time for that, because I was doing it. And not only was I doing
Sure.
it, I was managing them. So again, we had a really strong team by the end of it. And I just remember a conversation with one member of staff, and she had skipped two grade team meetings, and
Mm.
I was coordinating the grade team meetings, and I used to do a meeting with each grade. She hadn't been to two, so I bumped into her on the staircase one morning before school, and I said, "Ah, you didn't make it to our meeting the other day. I was really disappointed. I hoped you'd be there. I take it you had something really important to do." So she sort of doubled back and she said, "Oh, yeah, I was preparing a display for the kids' work in the classroom." And I was like, "Oh, that's really important. I'm glad you were doing that. Next week, please can you find a different time to do that? And please could you make sure you come to the grade meeting, because we'd really value your input and it's very important that you're there." Left it at that. Off I went. And the following week, she came to the meeting, and from there on in, she was an integral member of that team. And her work was already amazing, but she was a brilliant member of staff. And then we had a night out a few months after, and she took me to one side and she said, "Miss Zoe, you absolutely busted my balls that day." And she said, "I total respect." And I was
Well,
like,
and
she
you
said
did
it
it
was
in,
just the way that you did it. Yeah.
yeah, you did it in a very respectful way. You let her know that she was important and you just wanted her to be a part because she had a lot to offer and you really wanted to hear her thoughts. And also, another part of the leadership thing that I'm hearing when you're talking is that, you were hands on and you
Yeah.
led by example. You weren't just talking and telling people this is what you need to do and then you were gone. You disappeared. You were out there in the field, you were doing the things that you were asking them to do. And so they knew, for one thing, that you were experienced and you did know how to do it, but also that you were invested and you really meant what you were saying.
Yeah, and I did used to check on them. I didn't tell them that I was checking on them, but I was just constantly around and about,
Sure.
and I was checking on them. But I knew what was going on in my team, and I think you really have to do that as a leader, because if you don't know what's going on, that's when standards drop and things start to change. People cut corners, because as human beings, we're always looking for the easy options. We're always looking for the easier route.
Sure.
And if no one's reminding us that that route is there for a reason, and if you're not following it, you're cutting corners and certain elements of it are dropping away, then yeah, it just stops the service standard dropping, I think.
Well, I think that you demonstrate great leadership skills. So I hope you never doubt yourself as a leader again because you are definitely great at it. I want to ask you a question because while you were, I believe, in Asia, did COVID hit when you were over there? And it shifted for us here, but I can't imagine what it did for you there. I know my entire life changed after that. So, how did it change your life? And did the pandemic play a role in reshaping your path or accelerating your pivot toward holistic healing?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a crazy time for all of us all around the world. And the way that it happened, nothing like that had ever happened in any of our lifetimes before, not on a global scale like that.
No.
And the way that it unfolded, obviously I was living in China at the time, and it started in China. And there were so many things I learned and so many things that I saw. And so it started in China. And being a foreigner in China at the time, I couldn't understand fully from Chinese media how it was being presented and what was going on.
Mm.
So I was relying on translations and from expat news out there. I knew enough to get the gist of what was happening. And we had almost immediately, we were wearing masks.
Mm.
And things started to change. However, it was coming up towards Chinese New Year when the first few cases had broken out. But at that point, no one really knew
Mhm.
what was unfolding. So they still allowed everyone to travel at Chinese New Year, which we all did. I went to Cambodia and I had a couple of weeks in Cambodia. And as I was out there, I was then able to look at the English speaking news around the world. And I started to realize what was unfolding. And then I started to think, oh, am I going to get back into China? Because they started talking about shutting borders and things like that. Anyway, I did get back into China literally just before they shut the border.
Wow.
And from that moment we were into lockdown. Now lockdown out there was a bit different to what I understand lockdown over here had been, but at that point the UK wasn't locked down. So we weren't encouraged to go out. We could go out on our own, and if you lived in a household where there was more than one person, then only one person could go out either at a time or per day. I can't remember now. I know it was one at a time. I can't remember whether it was one per day. But I lived on my own, so I could go out once every day. We could still go to the supermarket. A lot of the smaller shops and services were closed. Gyms and things like that were closed. The school that I worked in was closed. So yeah, we very quickly went to online teaching in my school, and I think I was the first teacher for our organization to go online, and that was
Mm.
interesting. Everything in China was ready to go pretty quick. They've got the technology in place. I think they plan more carefully for stuff like this because they'd obviously had SARS out there previously.
Mm.
So they were ready to go quite quick. And we were out of that tight lockdown by the end of March because on my phone the other day it pops up with memories on my photos, and it popped up with me and two friends at a restaurant in China in 2020 at this particular time. And I thought, oh, and then I thought to myself, gosh, actually, we were out of lockdown pretty quick in China. And
Hmm.
then gradually it opened up a bit more. And I think by April, we were allowed to come and go. By June, think gyms and stuff were back open. And by June, we were back into school. Everyone was still wearing masks, but we were up and running. And then I didn't experience lockdown again. However, during that month when we were locked down, it really gave me a lot of time and space. We were still teaching online, but not as many hours a week as we would have been when we were in school. So there was loads of time each day for me to exercise, to go out for a walk, to meditate, to read. And it was whilst I was doing that that I first discovered Dolores Cannon and the quantum healing hypnosis technique. And that was fascinating. And it really
Mm.
opened my eyes to a whole new world. And I discovered I was doing yoga out there. So I was reading a lot more about Chinese medicine and Ayurveda and energy. And so it did that time was probably a refocus of my mind for when I left China. And I stayed in China until June 2021. So right through COVID. And as I
Hmm.
came back to England in June 21, things in England were starting to reopen. They were coming out of lockdown and things were starting to get back to normal. So that was a real opportunity for me. I didn't stay in China because they were mandating the COVID vaccine, and I didn't want to have it. I knew it hadn't had long enough to have been tested.
Okay.
And I didn't want to put chemicals in my body I wasn't, that I didn't have faith in, and I didn't have faith in it. It was a kind of an intuitive thing at the time. but it's a bit deeper than that now. And I came back to England. And so it was an opportunity again to reinvent myself again because I'd come back
Sure.
to England with no job, no plans. And so that was sort of then when I started to really work on, I'd started to train to become a QHHT practitioner whilst I was in China. And I was able to finish that training, and one thing led to another. And the deeper you delve, the more things present themselves. And so Your
Sure.
Vitality Coaching was launched in September 2021, and it's continued to evolve as time has gone on. So yeah, it really did set me on a new path. And for me, I guess it was a bit different because I was out there on my own, living on my own. I didn't
Sure.
have anyone out there to be thinking about in terms of family. I had a lot of close friends and we supported each other through lockdown and what was going on.
Mm, okay.
But it was a little bit different to if I would have been at home and had family close by. And so yeah, it did shape the way forward. It was a challenging time for everybody, I think.
Yeah. It stopped life as we knew it, for
It
sure.
did. It did.
Now, let's talk more about your healing journey, especially uh, your shifts that you did. I mean, with yoga, and also you seem to steer towards natural remedies. As you said earlier, you didn't
Mm.
want to take the traditional routes and the medicines and things like that. What role did they play with breath work, mindfulness, gratitude, and connecting with nature? And how did all that play out in your personal recovery?
So these things have become my toolkit for coping with life. And they all work, but different tools at different times, I've
Yeah,
found. So when the pace of modern life becomes overwhelming, which it frequently does, we've all
sure.
got responsibilities, commitments, um, and they're often very demanding. Timescales are short.
Mm,
It can become really overwhelming for a lot of us, and things always happen at once. So these are the tools that I use to sort of help me ground myself and clear and focus my mind, and then be able to continue with coping with life. The breath work I find really helps me to come back to the moment. You can be really focused on, oh my God, I've got this to do, I've got that to do, this needs doing by then, that needs. And if you just sit down and few breathing exercises, you can just clear that clutter and think and be able to then come back to the moment and then think, right, what is it that needs doing first? Because sometimes
sure.
we can't cut to that. Um, so that helps me when I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed. Every day I practice gratitude because there's always
Mm,
something to be grateful for. It doesn't matter what's going on in life. There's always something to be grateful
yeah,
for.
absolutely.
Um, and it's powerful, isn't it? Practicing gratitude. It really is powerful.
It
It
really is. Yeah, it shifts your mindset.
completely. Yeah. And it's such a small thing.
It
Like
really
to
is.
2 minutes of your time to just go, hang on a minute, what am I grateful for today? And it can just like that flick your mind back into the positive. I use essential oils now as a
Oh,
pretty
okay.
daily part of my life for different things. I use lemon oil sometimes when I'm cleaning the house. If I burn myself, I'm a bit clumsy, so I'm often burning myself on either the iron or the oven. And peppermint oil is great for that, and lavender. Um,
Oh, talk about lavender. We use it in the bath often. And I have kids, 3 kids with autism, and they can be absolutely crazy. And I'm like, well, it's time to get a bath. And honestly, it really does help. I mean, as soon as I smell it, I feel that calm. So, I mean, it really works.
it does, doesn't it? It's so powerful. And again, it's nature. We were given these things by the universe to use. Everything that we need, we've got. We don't need all these pharmaceutical drugs and potions and lotions. Yeah, okay, they help sometimes, but do we really want to commit ourselves to 20 years on certain medication when actually, if we bother to take the time and understand it, we've got herbs, plants, oils that can serve us better. And yeah, lavender's an amazing relaxation tool. And so many others. My essential oil collection has gone from about 6 oils to about 56 now. It's been an expensive few
Oh,
years,
wow.
but
Okay.
I do use them in my work as well with my Reiki clients, and they are really powerful. Frankincense is amazing. It's called the power oil because it magnifies the power of whatever oil you blend it with. Just so many. So I use oils for different things all the time, and they're sort of my medicine cabinet now, if you like, along with some herbs and spices. They're so powerful.
I love using thinking outside of the box and not just going to a prescription medication,
Mm,
you know, instead of being able to do some of these other things to help calm. I mean, nature was is one of my biggest healers when you talk about nature. And I spent a lot of time in the woods as a kid and in a tree. You know, I loved climbing the trees. And still today, when I go into the woods or even to a beach and I just soak up the wind and the waves, I really feel an instant calm. And some of these things that you're doing, you know, how does it help deepen our own self awareness and create real change in our confidence, motivation, and help us feel that emotional balance that we're all looking for?
I think it gives a point of focus sometimes. Um, and if we can, sometimes all we need is a single point of focus, and that can put us into a calm state. If we can get ourselves into a deep state of relaxation, that's when the body can heal itself. And there's lots of different ways of doing that, but they all require making the time to do it. And when life's busy, that's always the first thing that goes. And I'm
Yeah.
guilty of that. When my life is busy, my yoga practice on an evening probably won't happen. And I don't meditate as often. And they're the times when I need to be doing that more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like I was listening to you saying about the sounds of the sea, and I over the last sort of year, 18 months, I've discovered sound therapy, and one of my favorite instruments that I've got is my ocean drum. And it just sounds, when you're playing it, just sounds like the ocean. And I always start my sound therapy sessions with the ocean drum because it does bring you back down, back into your body, back to nature, and it's got that calming, grounding effect. Um,
My one son who's autistic, he's 8, and he started to play the pan drum, and you know, it has that same really calming sound, and it really does that for him. And
mm.
I'm so proud of him for wanting to go and grab it and play it because it's actually a tool that he uses.
Yeah, and then it's giving him that point. He's focusing on playing, he's focusing on the sound and the music, and
Yeah.
it's clearing his mind of whatever was causing anxiety, overwhelm, whatever he was feeling. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's amazing. And all of my sound instruments are set to the frequency of 432 hertz, which is
You
the
know, I've
healing
heard that.
frequency.
I've heard megahertz really make a difference. And I didn't
Absolutely.
even know about this, but recently somebody had said that to me. So I started looking up different frequencies and I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, this is
Yeah.
like a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. 70% of our body is water. Sound travels through water faster than it travels through air. So when you're listening to sound, or when sound is around your body and it's vibrating through your body,
Hmm.
it resonates with different parts of the body at different frequencies. So, and those different frequencies do different things for our bodies. Because if you think about it, our cells are largely made up of water through plasma, and so if our cells are at dis-ease, if they're not well, then they're not vibrating at the frequency they should. So the sound frequencies can help bring them back to the correct frequency. It's amazing.
That is just so interesting to me. We have so many things that are available for us that are just right there in front
Yeah,
of us. And we
costs
don't
nothing.
even really realize
Yeah.
it. It's just so beautiful. You know, I've reinvented myself many, many times. And I really believe in constantly evolving. You are the poster person for reinventing yourself, I think. And I think we have to give ourselves permission many times in order to do that. What have you learned about transformation, and what gives you the courage to keep evolving into new versions of yourself?
Yeah, I have transformed many times, not intentionally, but I think it's part of life's journey. And I think George Adair's famous quote is everything that you want is on the other side of fear. And my boss sort
Oh,
of translated that to and he uses it in his fitness classes sometimes to motivate people. And he'll say, the magic happens on the other side of the stuff that you don't want to do. Well,
mm,
actually, both of those are absolutely spot on, because the stuff that we find difficult, the stuff we're scared of, the stuff that we don't want to do, we have to overcome that in order to move, in order to
absolutely.
transform and develop. And when I think back, like moving from England to China, I remember I packed my house up, I gave most of my belongings away or I sold them. And I headed off to China with 2 suitcases and no real plan. I knew that I wanted to live there. I knew I wanted to work and I knew I
Mhm.
wanted to travel. That was my plan. I had no idea how long I was going for. If I would have known that COVID was going to break out, I think I'd have gone 5 years sooner. But anyway, what was that scary? Yes.
Mm.
But I didn't focus on the fear. I focused on
See?
what I really wanted to achieve. And if I would have been frozen in the fear, I would have never done it. So we have to put that fear out of the way, accept it, acknowledge it, but we still have to keep going, don't we? Otherwise we remain stuck. And that is a choice. That's something
It
else
is
I've
a
learned.
choice.
It's a choice. None of us are rooted to the spot. We've all got choice. That choice might not be nice and it might not be a welcome choice.
Yeah.
And so evolving is
And
something
I
that we
don't
can
think a lot
do.
of us realize or see that choice.
Mm,
We don't, a lot of people really don't see themselves being able to go through the fear, get
mm,
to the other side, because success or whatever you really want is really on the other side. And fear is a lie. Most of the things that are standing in between us and whatever we want to achieve isn't really even going to happen.